Passionate auto racing used to take place in our area on a road course that ran right through the heart of town. And although that 6.6-mile course has been supplanted by the world-renowned race course just up the hill, Watkins Glen International, every year our humble little town hosts as many as 25,000 spectators who come out in droves to help us celebrate our historic auto racing heritage by partaking in a tribute reenactment of those old road races.
Robin is now bringing the lead car up to the start line. Please do not cross the street at this time.
In addition to live music, wine tasting, delicious food, and merchandise vendors, the festival hosts over 600 classic sports automobiles of numerous marks and eras parked along the village streets.
So the original 6 points.
Hi, I'm Jesse with Sidle Insurance, and today we are attending the Watkins Glen Grand Prix Festival, just a stone's throw away from our office in Montour Falls, New York. We're going to check out some stunning vehicles, we're going to chat with some folks about their awesome classic cars, and we might learn a thing or two about insurance. We start the day off on Main Street in Montour Falls, where the Glenora Run gathering comes filing in. I wait with our agency president, David Sidle, as we watch classic cars zoom down through the straightaway, weaving through cones as they go, then parking at the end of the street for a brief display. It's cool to get a nice, up-close look at these vehicles, but it wouldn't be cool to get too close. Follow along with me for just a second on a brief but enlightening detour. In order to register a vehicle in the state of New York, you are required to have New York State-issued automobile liability insurance coverage. If you fail to maintain the coverage, the DMV can suspend your driver's license and vehicle registration. One portion of that required liability insurance is something called property damage liability. This coverage, which starts at a state minimum coverage limit of $10,000 for a single accident, covers repairs to another individual's property, like a mailbox or a building, or a vehicle, when you are at fault in the event of an accident. Why is this coverage required in the state of New York? Well, even a slight fender bender can leave you financially responsible for repair costs to someone else's vehicle. And the repair costs can get ugly in a hurry, especially if that vehicle happens to be a high-value one. These are expenses that you'd have to pay out of pocket if you don't carry the right amount of property damage liability coverage. And that's why at Sidle Insurance, we recommend greater coverage limits than the state minimum. Think about it. Do you believe $10,000 in property damage is really enough coverage should you damage someone else's vehicle? Especially if it looks like this?
A lot more than that.
Yeah, it's got to come out of your pocket. If you don't mind me asking, how much you got in this?
Probably 60, 65, something like that. Yeah.
Did you have to do a lot to her, or was a lot of it
the
original?
guy who had it before me, it was like the story of the old lady that had the car. Well, he was a German car fine tool machinist.
Oh my gosh.
And when he retired, he did all the mechanical stuff himself.
How neat.
And had the interior done, but the paint job was really was a make-them job. So we had it all repainted and replaced some chrome and things like that.
Yeah.
But he was about 80-something years old.
No kidding.
And it was pretty cool talking to him.
I'll bet it was.
Yeah, at first I was concerned about the color because it really is a very bright blue. But it's like, oh, it looks so period.
Yeah. What kind of value you got in this? Kind of investment?
This car right now?
Yeah.
30 grand minimum.
Is it?
Minimum. The car in this
They've gone up a lot.
Yeah.
And this has a W58 too. I have a Toyota transmission.
There you go. Yeah. 5-speed. Yep.
But the average for these TR6s, 12, 15.
Yeah. 12 to 15. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But the last couple of years, these things have really shot up. They were really stagnant for a long time.
Yep.
And like last 2 or 3 years, all of a sudden, I've been seeing ones on Bring a Trailer for 40 plus.
Right. I saw one. Did you see the one that we went for 50?
Yeah.
It was a red one, but it was like It was all like original. It was really, it was like somebody kept it in a garage somewhere.
We had a claim many years ago over in Corning. They were doing a Ferrari day.
That's a whole nother ball game.
And he was parallel parked, and a guy pulled in and he clipped him. $17,500 claim. He took like the headlight and the front of the fender. And you know, the guy that owned the Ferrari was really cool about it. He was like,
Yeah.
you know, those things happen. I got insurance for it, but you know, he was obviously upset. His car got crunched, but
Yeah, and that's it. I mean, you start getting some of these, you know, these higher end stuff. I mean,
Yeah.
you'll see it. Well, you'll see it downtown. You'll see some really crazy stuff.
Oh, I know.
You know.
yeah.
So that's amazing. No, but that's the fear. You know.
The numbers are starting to speak for themselves. The New York state minimum does not appear to be adequate.
There's one for sale over on Hector for $13,000.
Yeah, they want $13,000 for that one.
But what is adequate? We mentioned that the current New York state minimum property damage limit is $10,000 per accident. But it's in the name. Minimum is minimal. Purchasing measly coverage is a risky practice. At Sidle Insurance, we want our clients to be protected. And to that point, in our office, property damage liability limits on a personal auto policy that we sell generally start at 10 times as much. We look at it this way. The handful of dollars you might save by lowballing your coverage limits is really just peanuts compared to the amount of money you'll have to pay out of pocket if you have a significant claim and don't have the insurance to back you up. We're just wrapping up our Glenora Run visit when something catches our attention. A red Ferrari with an interesting backstory.
This one was, for a long time, they were like the lowest value Ferrari, although when they were sold new, it was the highest price Ferrari sold.
Yeah.
And they all were gray market import. Ferrari said, I'm not going to take the two of the most expensive cars I build and drive them into a wall at 50 mile an hour or whatever they had to do for the crash test.
Right.
He said, I just ain't going to do it. So they all came in gray market. Maintenance, they're a lot of work. This one, I said, front engine V12. First couple of years, I've had it 16 years. First couple of years, kind of reliability issues, mainly electrical. But now it's bulletproof. I just go.
Now you replaced everything.
Well, I re-engineered.
Yeah.
A lot of the wiring has been redone.
Yeah.
There's some silly stuff they did with the wiring, and it's because the Ferrari just doesn't give. You know, we build motors. Pininfarina puts a fancy body around it.
Right.
And that's it. I mean, I would. If someone offers me $60,000, they get it.
Yeah.
You know, and then I got spare parts, and I got all my books and all this stuff on it. But you know, people try to negotiate me down. I'll keep the spare parts and I'll sell them. You know, and stuff that's valuable. So we'll see.
It's tough to find the parts for it.
Yes and no.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, it's a General Motors transmission.
Yeah.
The engine, basically, there's nothing to do in it. But if there are parts for the motor, and then when you get to the bodywork, what Pininfarina did, there's BMW parts, there's Fiat parts. The first thing I needed when I got the car, the mirrors, they both adjust. They weren't working.
Yeah.
To pull the thing apart, and it was a little cracked. I soldered it. I got it plugged to plug in, everything worked. But by the time I got it all back in the door, it broke again. So I called like 6 Ferrari dealers. I've got the one in Chicago, and he says, I can tell you this, it's a BMW part. And he says, and I'd love to know what the part number is because I got 2 customers that I need one for. So I walked into the BMW dealer, and the young kid, he didn't recognize it. There's an older guy there. From across the room, he says, oh, that's from the whatever. So then the kid goes and looks that up, and he says, is it for 2 mirrors or 1? And I said, for 2. And he goes, here's the part. There's 12 of them in the warehouse. I'll have it tomorrow.
No kidding. Isn't that funny?
Eventually, Dave heads back to the office, and our Glenora Run friends make their way to Watkins, Glen, a couple miles down the road to join hundreds of other classic cars and driving the old course. But before I follow the long line of cars to the Grand Prix Festival, there's something I really ought to address. I'll try to keep it brief. The other portion of that required liability insurance we discussed earlier is something called bodily injury liability coverage. It's pretty much what it sounds like. Insurance protection meant to cover injuries to other individuals should you be found at fault in an accident. It may also pay for legal fees if you are taken to court following such a scenario. Much like property damage, New York State's minimum coverage limits for bodily injury on a personal auto are not nearly enough in our eyes. They start at $25,000 per person and $50,000 total per accident. Considering how pricey medical transport such as an ambulance ride or airlifts can be, not to mention hospital stays and legal fees, we consider folks with those limits to be severely underinsured. Our standard bodily injury limits on a personal auto policy start at $100,000 per person and $300,000 per accident. Do you know the liability limits on your auto policy? That might be something worth looking into. Watkins Glen is located at the southern tip of Seneca Lake, and I can't help but take a moment to soak up its beauty before I join in the festivities of the Grand Prix Festival. In short time, I make my way to Franklin Street. There, thousands of festival goers bask in the early September sun as they await a rush of beautiful vehicles to breeze by. Strangely enough, drifting along through the air is a true pre-race energy. The excitement continues to build, and the feeling of anticipation is nothing short of profound. The Grand Prix Festival functions like an old engine. Block after block, I trickle through the veins of town which pump me along on a mystical escapade. And one could imagine how the scene harkens back to the early days of North American road racing, which were in part championed by the old course at Watkins Glen. And just then, led by a herd of Mustangs, a spectacular array of collector cars traces its brush over the old course and stampedes through town. The fleet rumbles over the roads of Watkins Glen, heads quite literally for the hills, then comes motoring back down Franklin Street only a few moments later. An interesting note about the festival is that every year they honor a specific mark, and indeed the Ford Mustang is this year's honoree. After they've had their turn around the old course, over 75 Mustangs make a pit stop at gorgeous Lafayette Park. I experience a remarkably serene moment here as nearby church bells welcome them in. And though it may feel like things are winding down, we have yet to see the main attraction. But before we get there, I've got one last lesson to share. We've talked a lot about having the right amount of liability coverage, but there are other insurance coverages you can get on your auto policy if you want to protect your own vehicle. In fact, if you bought your car by way of a loan, the lien holder may actually require you to get these coverages. For example, collision coverage covers damages to your vehicle from a collision with another vehicle or object, such as a telephone pole or a guardrail. Comprehensive coverage is for things like theft or damage not involving a collision, unless it's a collision with an animal. Think a fallen tree branch or repairs needed to your vehicle if you hit a deer. If you own a collector car and want to protect it financially, then you may want to consider an antique auto policy rather than a regular personal auto policy. With regular personal auto policies, the maximum coverage limit for comprehensive and collision is usually the actual cash value of the automobile at the time of the accident. And keep in mind, the actual cash value of a regular automobile typically depreciates over time. Conversely, collector cars usually don't depreciate the way other automobiles do. In fact, they sometimes appreciate or go up in value. And as such, with an antique auto policy, the vehicle is usually covered for an agreed amount between you and your insurance company. Antique auto policies are also often cheaper than regular personal auto policies, which is partially based off of the fact that you likely aren't driving a collector car around as regularly as you might other vehicles. There are also other insurance coverages out there, such as rental and towing. We recommend that if you have any questions about your insurance coverage, that you approach a professional, independent insurance agent. At last, we reach the final event. The antique race cars have arrived for the Grand Prix tribute. I soak up some time hanging around these dated motorized beasts.
Drivers, start your engine. Al, thank you very much. We have 2 laps of all of the SCRA cars.
Finally, they reenact history. We watch them drive the old course.
Hi, I'm Dave Sidle from Sidle Insurance. Thank you for watching this video. If you'd like assistance with your insurance needs, feel free to reach out to our team by calling 607-535-6501, or you can visit us online at sidleinsurance.com.